Welcome back! This video covers the construction process of the Rakshasa small vessel. Perhaps you can draw some inspiration for your own builds out of it. The first thing I always do is to create a design language. This time I wanted the vessel to have large semi-exposed engines. It also should give the visual impression like there's an outer and an inner hull. And the hangar should be placed on the rear end of the ship. Also, the ship shouldn't be asymmetric because, well, just because I wanted to build an asymmetrical vessel. So I just started to try out several approaches to achieve the given style. As you can see here, I cut out some parts of the outer hull covering the thrusters. Beneath would be a layer of darker material to reinforce the double-layered look. It quickly became obvious that the key to success would be elevated sections of the hull and high contrasts. I also needed to craft some fake machinery I could then cover up to make the ship look more technically complex. In the process, I tried out several styles of covers and different modes of thruster placement. In the end, I found out that my approach took way too much space and made the ship too bulky. So, as always, I scrapped my first concept and started over, keeping all the things in mind I learned from my first try. First thing on the list was the hangar. Starting there, I've built the basic shape of the ship to get a feel for its dimensions. I decided to have some rooms on the right hand side and to put a gun battery on the left. Next, I placed most of the thrusters needed for upward and forward thrust. Notice the hybrid build of hardened and standard steel blocks. If I build for PvE, I always use this construction method, which saves a lot of weight. Next up, we're doing the basic internals to find a style for doors and hallways. I decided to keep the main hangar and corridors open for faster navigation and less downtime opening doors while walking through the ship. Notice, by the way, that I construct the ship floating over the starting platform, which has a gravity generator. This way you can walk inside the ship, which gives a better impression of how navigating the corridors will feel in the finished vessel. Before switching tasks, I did a rough overhaul of the hangar interior. The sidewalls are rounded to look more like a pressurized hull than just a square room in a building. Then I started to work on the outside again. I added 2 big thrusters for reverse thrust and constructed a proper housing for them. Then I covered the rest of the thrusters with a thicker skin of armor on the top and a thinner layer on the bottom, which makes the ship look more compact and nimble instead of bulky and heavy. With that done, I continued to smooth out the rest of the ship's hull like you can see on the side part. The top side was decorated with half blocks, which should resemble some kind of air intake later on. I also put a large wind channel on the bottom to streamline the ship's underside. Next up was finding a place for the warp drive, which ended up on the top rear portion of the ship. This includes building a casing for it all along with a hatch, because I wanted every device on the ship to be fully accessible without having to remove any blocks. In the process, I also decorated the brake thruster housings with some nice fins. Connect everything with the backside hull above the hangar doors, and we're done. Now for the most complicated part, the cockpit. The front portion of the ship should be asymmetric too, so I tried out a rounded window. It looked like shit. A full glass cover didn't look any better, so I tried a partial one. Then I tried to improve looks by building some kind of fake sensor array to the right of the cockpit. Looked like crap, so I ditched it and covered the whole nose of the ship. Sadly, this turned out way too bulky compared to the rest of the ship. So I also discarded this style and went with a more angular shape. Looked better, but boring and too symmetric. I postponed the final decision and continued to work on things I already had a clear look in mind for. The bottom of the ship was the perfect spot for additional directional thrusters. Afterwards, I made use of the new custom wings and put 2 of them on the back and some smaller ones near the front. I also added a layer of armor on top of the weapons bay to make the asymmetrical look of the ship less obvious but still noticeable. Afterwards, I bolted on the encased landing gears and a gun pod on the right side of the ship's hull. Then I re-examined the overall look of the ship. As you can see, I picked up the idea of the fake sensors again. And I decided to incorporate some kind of air intake or utility slot to break up the large flat areas on the ship's nose. They turned out to be a good location for some spotlights. I also sunk the cockpit 1 block into the hull to make it look slimmer. The fake sensors didn't live long though, as they were replaced with a dual gun mount just 10 minutes later. With most of the ship done so far, it was time to do the paint job. White for the fake outer hull, black for the inner part. In the process, I carved out the central front part of the ship to further streamline the cockpit area, and the fake sensors came back from the dead again, this time for good. To improve details, I added some kind of elevated armor in front of the top thrusters and colored the space around them in black. Note that the white and black colors are both 1 digit different from full black and full white. For example, white is 255, 255, 254. This way you can recolor the whole hull later without recoloring black and white parts of the interior. With the basic coloring done, I went on to add details to the ship, like this little hatch and another fake sensor on the front. I also put some navigation lights on the ship's hull. After another re-examination of the ship's look, I took the decision to rotate the weapons bay. The slope now descends towards the front, which increases the aerodynamic look of the ship. There's enough room inside to decorate the hangar with cargo boxes. And you also can build a nice cockpit and a useless but pretty crew area. Also, there's enough space on the right side of the ship for an engine room with generators and lots of fuel tanks. The RCS units fit into the ceilings of the 2 corridors. They are covered up by the 2 long air intakes I placed earlier, as you remember. And that's it, we're done. I hope this could inspire your own builds and spark some ideas. And maybe it lets you skip some of the errors I made during construction. If you found the video to be helpful, then feel free to like, share, comment and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next Magnets and Miracles.